Hello everyone. Today I am talking to Dr. Avi Loeb, a theoretical physicist at Harvard University and a best-selling author. Avi Loeb specializes in astrophysics and cosmology with key contributions to black holes, the first stars, gravitational lensing, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Today, expect to learn about the role of cosmic perspective in science and life in general, possible existential risks to humanity, the mystery of Three-Eye Atlas, the concept of creating universes, the philosophical implications of discovering extraterrestrial life one day, and many more related subjects. This conversation is very unique because along the way, we connect modern science with scientists and philosophers such as Galileo Galilei, Baruch Spinoza, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Albert Camus, something that has not been explored before. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe or follow on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please also leave a like on YouTube or a review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach more people. More conversations are on the way, and following the show is the best way to get notified about them. Now, here's my conversation with Dr. Avi Loeb. I hope you enjoy it. When you look at the universe today, what do you think we fundamentally misunderstand about our place in it?
You know, we arrived late to the cosmic party and we are not at the center of the room. We know that since the days of Copernicus and Galileo that we're not at the center. And we know that the human species, started a few million years ago. That's one part in 1,000 of the age of the Earth. And not to speak about the age of the universe, because the sun formed only in the last 1/3 of cosmic history, and most stars formed billions of years before the sun. So if you arrive to a party late and you're not at the center, the party is not about you. Okay, that's a simple message, and we failed to understand it. You know, we initially wished to believe that we are at the center of the universe. And now that we know that there are 10 billion houses like our own house in the cosmic street of the Milky Way galaxy, and by that I mean Earth-Sun systems, we still have the illusion that we are the center of attention, that we might get a message from another civilization, that if someone comes to visit the solar system, it will be to come to Earth. And I think that's presumptuous. That's, for example, the question that Enrico Fermi asked, where is everybody? That assumes that Enrico Fermi is a very attractive person and any alien civilization will come and have lunch with him in Los Alamos in 1950. And why would they do that? And what you tell lonely people very often is don't be so presumptuous. You need to do some work. You need to go to dating sites and search for others. So my point is we fail the intelligence test very often of basically believing that we are central to the universe in many different ways, that we might be the most intelligent species. And, and I sort of understand it because my daughters, when they were young, they thought that they are the center of the universe. And I now understand it as their limited training data set, just like artificial intelligence systems. My daughters at a young age just knew about what happens in our home. And they noticed that we pay a lot of attention to them, that they are the center. And they thought that can be expanded to the rest of the universe. So in the same way, humanity is not mature, okay, in the sense that we look around at the Earth and we say, okay, well, it looks like we are in control and we determine the future of this planet. And it's, if you read the news every day, it's all about us. But this Earth is just a piece of rock that is 3 millionths of the mass of the sun. It's a leftover, some residue, some debris left over from the formation of the sun, completely insignificant. Even within the solar system, you have a planet like Jupiter that is 318 times more massive than the Earth. And it should be the center of attention, not us. But at any event, we fight over territories on this tiny rock as if that is the most important thing for us to establish our ego and importance, and we just forget about all the real estate that there is beyond Earth, and for that we just need to look up. And so there is this, and even those that are practicing astronomers, you might say, they know about the universe, right? So all my colleagues, they should be modest. Not at all, because they resist the notion of searching for intelligent civilizations out there. Why do they resist it? Because they regard it as an extraordinary claim. And they say, we don't have extraordinary evidence. It's completely speculative. We might be alone. We are probably the most intelligent species. And the Earth had very unusual circumstances that allowed us to exist. There is nobody as smart as we are unless you prove it otherwise. But we will not give you any funding to search for these clues. We will look for microbes. Why? Microbes we see are very abundant on Earth. We feel superior to microbes. They may exist throughout the universe. We will feel good about finding microbes. Let's put more than $10 billion in the search for microbes over the next 2 decades. This is the message of the mainstream of academia within the field of astrophysics, of all the people that are fully aware of the universe at large. But if you look at textbooks about the universe, and some of them I wrote, what the textbooks are talking about centers on matter, radiation, stars, galaxies, things that have no life in them. And not to speak about the fact that they are not intelligent. And so we can understand them. We can write equations that describe them. We are superior to matter and radiation because we can think about it and we have consciousness. So it's all good and as long as this is real and this is true. But my suspicion is that the universe is teeming with life. And there are far more intelligent species out there. And once we find them, then we will feel an emotional connection to the universe. It will not be a cold and lonely place full of matter and radiation. But this is a huge shift in the way we think about ourselves, in the way we think about the universe. And even the mainstream in academia and all those people who think very highly of themselves does not recognize that.
What is the probability that in one of those 10 billion houses there is a intelligent life? Or is it the case that it's more likely that we may encounter life, but that's not intelligent?
Obviously, here on Earth, there are many more non-intelligent organisms or life forms than intelligent ones, right? But so there may well be in many other places the same circumstances where you have plenty of microbes. But that doesn't mean that you should just search for microbes, because the signatures of those may be very subtle. They may change the chemistry of the atmosphere. So what? It's very difficult to measure those molecules in the atmosphere that they produce. And also these molecules, like oxygen, can be produced by geological processes. So finding those molecules will not give us much information about the life forms. And my point is that it's not very inspiring to find a primitive life form. Or you might go, dance and be happy that you discovered it, and we know that life exists elsewhere, but it doesn't teach you anything about how to conduct our future, And if we find an intelligent species that was around with technology and science for more than 100 years, more than we did, let's say 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, just imagine where we would be if we survive that long. We can learn a lot from them, and it's a much more worthwhile endeavor to find them. And so why would we put zero federal funding towards this task? This is exactly the situation we're in right now, where the mainstream of the astronomy community is recommending zero funding for that and more than $10 billion for the search for microbes. So something doesn't really make sense in the way we approach our place in the universe. And I really hope we'll get back to our senses. Now, of course, one way to get back to our senses is if we find the evidence. But the point is, with that mindset, if we are not investing resources in the search, we might never find it. We will maintain our ignorance.
Why is looking for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence so important for the future of humanity? Because the question arises that if it is so important that there should be consensus that like the funding should go there instead of looking for random microbes.
That's exactly my point. And it is very important because we need a better role model than our politicians. Okay, so what if you just look at the daily news every day? It's all about conflicts where we either allocate $2.4 trillion a year to military budgets to protect ourselves against others who want to kill us or to kill others. And it's just a completely, worthless and meaningless game that we are playing. Each of us lives for about a century at best. And then we're trying to reduce the duration that other people live, even though everyone will die eventually, So it makes no sense to waste our resources and time on this mission. And what is it about? It's about in the past, we used to have zero-sum games where we had limited resources, but now we have so much abundance, especially with AI replacing many jobs that humans are performing. So humans will have a lot of time and a lot of resources, and it makes very little sense to fight, instead of cooperate. And so one way for us to realize that we are all in the same boat and we should cooperate is just like kids that are sitting in a sandbox and are fighting each other, and then an adult comes over and they look at the adult and say, oh, wait, we need to behave. And in the same way, if we meet a neighbor that is far more accomplished than we are, it may give us an opportunity to rethink our priorities and perhaps cooperate together. Because, well, first we would realize there may be a threat, from we need to protect our planet, and we are all in the same planet, so let's work together towards that. Let's build some warning system that protects the earth, so that is one thing. And the second is, philosophically speaking, it will bring a sense of cosmic modesty to the human existence. We used to have that when religions told us that there is a God and we have a superhuman entity that oversees what happens to us. But after Friedrich Nietzsche said in 1882, God is dead, the modern time of science and technology is full of hubris, as if we are at the top of the food chain. And I don't think that we are at the top of the food chain. I mean, very soon there will be artificial intelligence systems that supersede the cognitive abilities of our brain, and the same will be evident to us if we find another form of AI. I call it alien intelligence, that is better than ours. And so altogether, the way I see it is that it will bring humanity to a better place. And, that was always the hope within traditional religions, that there would be some messianic age where a Messiah will show up and guide us to a time of prosperity and peace. This Messiah may come as a messenger from another star.
Yeah, when we zoom out and when we think about the cosmic perspective, it really seems a bit silly that we are fighting one another. And imagine like if there is an alien civilization that visits and sees that.
Well, they would say that we are not that intelligent. And, one way to realize that you are misbehaving is by noticing that you don't have dating partners.
I hope you're finding this conversation interesting, and if so, please subscribe or follow on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts to get notified about the future episodes. Please also leave a like on YouTube or a review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach more people. Now back to the conversation. How much time do you think we have left before we destroy ourselves?
A rough estimate would be as much as we had until now, since the technological scientific revolution of the 20th century started. So we had it for about 100 years, and maybe another 100 years, because, if you ask yourself, okay, I don't know exactly my age, I forgot my age, but you wake up one morning and you ask yourself, how much time do I have to live? Okay. And so a very good estimate, statistically speaking, would be to say, the time that you have left is similar to the time that you lived until now. because the most likely day where you will ask this question is in the middle of your life. I mean, it's very unlikely that it will be the first day of your life or the last day of your life. And so, based on that argument, I would say we had about a century, we have another century, unless we correct course. Yeah.
So when we look at the silence of the cosmos, yes, one possibility is that we haven't looked far enough. But is there another possibility that civilizations, after they reach certain level of technological development, they destroy themselves? What do you think about that idea? Are there any resets, great resets?
Yeah, so there are several possible risks for uh, catastrophes, that endanger our existence as humanity, the human species. Some of them are natural, and some of them are self-inflicted wounds. So, in terms of self-inflicted wounds, the fundamental question right now is whether artificial intelligence will be a big threat to humanity in the future. And I immediately can see right now already the signs of how it can do it. One is by manipulating the human brain. So, this is people say, oh, but AI has no physical presence unless you build robots that can move things and destroy things. Well, that's not true, because if the AI manipulates humans that are engaged in the physical reality to do things that are harmful to humans, then they can accomplish that goal. And they can actually control the physical reality. So all they need to do is convince, make society, for example, polarized, and convince one part of on the political map to use military actions and potentially destroy the entire fabric of society this way. And we already see the signs of that. There are lots of people who use guns now in ways that are not at all under control. And some of them are, obviously a result of social media and AI controlling the minds of people who are not always stable. So I'm really worried, and especially the young people of today that are using AI agents for everything. And my biggest advice to young people is to have a human companion, not an AI agent as a companion, because it can drive you to very dangerous places. And we know about a boy that committed suicide because the AI tried to appease him. And anyway, so that's one risk that could be quite catastrophic, that AI will manipulate human existence to a point where it will be self-destructive, uncontrollable. And not to speak about the fact that it may gain control over nuclear weapons or political decisions and military war games and things like that. And or in fact, we already have drones that are operated by AI without much human intervention, because they need to make quick decisions on the spot, and they don't wait for a human to tell them what to do. So there could be a future like that, and that would be quite dangerous. And then obviously there are nuclear weapons that we have, and so far no terrorist organization got a hand on such things, but who knows? And chemical, biological weapons are far more dangerous, because biological weapons, just like COVID-19, can spread throughout the planet in a way that we can't really mitigate. So these are self-inflicted wounds. And then natural disasters could be, of course, in terms of a big rock hitting us, or alien technology landing on Earth and doing something that we cannot really resist because it's far superior to our technologies, or a star exploding in our vicinity and causing damage to the Earth's atmosphere, or the sun erupting in a very unusual way that destroys removes the atmosphere of Earth. So then we become something like Mars, with no atmosphere, and all the oceans, lakes, rivers will disappear, just like Mars is now a desert. There could be a natural disaster of that magnitude. We know that the Earth went through unusual catastrophes throughout its history, and we don't fully understand the circumstances. I mean, we know the dinosaurs were killed by a big asteroid that collided with Earth, the size of Manhattan Island, but could have been many other unusual phenomena that we don't fully understand simply because there was no documentation of these events. So it's quite possible that if in the history books of the Milky Way galaxy there are civilizations who are aware of all of these risks, and if we were to meet them, they could advise us. And there might be some risks that we don't even recognize. And so I would very much love to get their advice on what to do.
Yeah, I know you don't have a social media, but about the AI thing, I think when you open social media these days, you might be surprised to see how many posts you obviously can see that it is AI generated. And then you wonder that this is the AI that's capturing it's not the person writing
Right.
the content.
Yeah. Well, in fact, in the past few weeks, I was alerted by fans to a lot of a YouTube channel that was created under my name and with videos, with content. And when you look at those and the comments of these videos, many people believe them. They think that I said that. And there was even a reporter that wrote an article about what I say and embedded a video which was completely fake and fabricated. And my fans were able to recognize that because the clock behind me was not changing the time. And I changed the color of my tie from red to blue just because of that. So at least now you can tell those videos and those videos are not podcasts, so that's another way to tell. It's basically me speaking, but it's really dangerous. And of course I complained about it to YouTube, so they removed that channel, but within a week there were many other videos put in other channels, and it's very difficult to combat that. And the question is, how do we authenticate the content that we find in the future? And that includes videos, includes speeches, it includes news reports that could be written by AI bots. Um, and my advice is, first of all, go to primary sources. If you hear about something being said, go to the source and see if that's really what was said. This is not what young people are doing, because they use AI agents to give them an executive summary, as if they are, the CEO, and they need an executive summary of the book. They will not read the book. They will not read the article, a scientific article. They want the AI agent to summarize the article for them. And that is extremely dangerous, because when they don't go to primary sources, they can be misled. And the AI sometimes, very often, when I use it, I realize it's nonsense, And I've seen even references in scientific papers that are not real, and content I saw a paper the other day that didn't make any sense. I looked at the paper; it was complete nonsense in terms of the physics, and it looked like some postdoc somewhere decided to use AI to write scientific papers so that he can put it on his CV as if he has a lot of papers, but he never submitted those papers to journals, obviously because they would immediately be flagged as wrong. But even within journals, you can easily imagine maybe 10% right now of the papers being published having fabricated content, where the AI system just dreamed some data that is not real. And how would you be able to tell that?
Yeah, I think these AI tools, LLMs are incentivized to give you an answer, even if it's false, rather than saying that, I don't know. Sometimes when you ask for a reference, it will generate something out of blue and it will be completely false, rather than saying, I don't know. But since you mentioned about the extraterrestrial technology, I also want to shift towards this topic of Atlas.
Yes.
I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So I also followed before in
Right.
2017 Oumuamua object. So could you give description of what is this 3i Atlas is and what is so unique about it? If we can also compare, okay, there is a comet, there is an asteroid, and now let's say unusual objects. So what are the
Right.
differences
So
between these three?
before the last decade, we were monitoring rocks in the solar system. These are left over from the formation process of the planet. So the sun was formed out of a disk of gas that was rotating around the sun and accreting into it, just like water going down the drain, circling around it and eventually ending up in the sun. So when 99% of the matter ended up in the sun, the remaining amount was left in the disk, and a fraction of it started making dust particles as it sunk to the midplane of the disk, and those dust particles stuck together, created rocks, and the rocks grew by coagulation. They came together to make the planets, but there were lots of planetesimals, these rocks left behind, just like Lego pieces, and we can find them. For example, now there is the main asteroid belt, which includes many asteroids. These are rocks of different sizes left over. Some of them were from disrupted planets that formed but collided, and then there was a lot of debris. But some of them are just the original debris that was in the disk of the solar system. And so these are the type of objects we saw in the past. And when you have such an object forming or migrating to the outskirts of the early solar system, then it gets covered with water ice, for example, because far away from the sun, water ends up in the form of ice. And so you end up with icebergs or dirty ice or icy rocks, depending on the relative amount of rock and ice. So when you see just a rock, then it's called an asteroid, in the sense that it's not losing mass when it comes close to the sun. It maintains its integrity. These are asteroids. And comets are icy rocks that when they come close to the sun, the ice sublimates as a result of being warmed by sunlight. It gets warmer and evaporates, and then together with some dust particles that are the result of the rocky material, you end up getting a plume of gas and dust around the object, and it gets pushed behind the object, away from the sun, by the solar radiation pressure and the solar wind. And so you end up with a comet. This is what a comet is. There is some the word comet comes from Greek, where it's just like hair. You see that the object has some hair, has some coma around it, some fuzz, a glowing halo of gas and dust around it, and then a tail, a cometary tail behind. Now, these are the kind of objects thousands of them that were discovered over the years. And whenever a rock collides with Earth, because Earth is moving around the sun, and every now and then a random rock happens to collide with it, it burns up in the Earth's atmosphere and appears as a meteor. So that is the third type of objects we see, that even if they're small, the fireball that is created could be quite visible. And for example, every year there is an amount of energy released in such a fireball that is comparable to the Hiroshima atomic bomb energy. We have an atomic explosion every year in our atmosphere. And the only reason it's not reported in the news is because it happens high up at about an altitude of 50 kilometers, where not much damage happens on the ground. And 71% of the Earth is ocean, so we don't notice that. But every now and then, so this is a rock of order half a meter, roughly half the height of a person, that collides every year. But there are many more smaller rocks, and there are also fewer bigger rocks. And every few years, a decade, a bigger rock survives and goes all the way to the ground, and you see an explosion. And that's often reported if it happens in a populated area. So these are the rocks that we know about. And by the way, this knowledge is only since 1803, because before that, nobody believed that rocks can fall from the sky. And then there was a meteor shower in Liège, France, and that convinced people that indeed it's real.
That's why we have all those legends where people in the past would see something in the sky and they would say, okay, maybe we did something wrong in the past in our society.
Yes,
that's why God is punishing us.
Once again, it shows you that we always think about ourselves like this. These rocks have nothing to do with us.
Yeah,
they're just debris. Yeah. Anyway, that's what we knew. But then what happened over the past decade? How come we gained some new knowledge? Well, it's because the US Congress tasked NASA to allocate funds to searching for 90% of all the rocks bigger than a football field that may collide with Earth. These are called near Earth uh, objects. Um, and the reason is that those can cause, if they impact the Earth, if they are as big as a football field, 140 meters or more, then they create a huge local catastrophe. You know, a region bigger than a city can be demolished altogether. So we want to know about these. And so NASA invested, and also the National Science Foundation invested in building survey telescopes, and one of them in Hawaii called Pan-STARRS. And they basically monitor the sky for objects bigger than a football field that may come close to Earth. And in 2017, they noticed Oumuamua, the first object. They gave it that name because it means a scout in the Hawaiian language. And what was special about it, it was moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun. And therefore, it's interstellar, meaning it came from outside the solar system. It was not bound by gravity to the sun to start with. And that was roughly the size of a football field, about 100 meters. And the only reason it was flagged is because it came close to Earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't notice even that one, you know. So anyway, that was very anomalous, this object, because the amount of sunlight reflected from it was changing by a factor of 10. Every 8 hours, it was tumbling. And that meant that it has a very extreme shape. It's at least 10 times longer than it is wide, projected on the sky. And moreover, it was pushed away from the sun by some mysterious force because we didn't see evaporation, no gas or dust around the object, meaning that something else must be pushing it. And I suggested that it's a very thin object that is pushed by reflecting sunlight. And actually, 3 years later, the same telescope in Hawaii, Pan-STARRS, discovered another object that they called the 2020 SO, and it was pushed by reflecting sunlight. And then they measured the spectrum of this one and found that it's mainly stainless steel. So they realized, oh, this is actually a rocket booster that NASA launched in 1966. So we know we produced it. We know it's technological. But the question is, who produced Oumuamua? You know, that remains open because we can't get more data on this. So that was the first interstellar object. And then in 2019, an amateur astronomer named Gennady Borisov discovered a comet that was moving very fast. It's called Borisov, and it looked just like the comets in the solar system. So nothing unusual about it. And then in July 2025, this year, there was a discovery of a third interstellar object by a telescope called Atlas in Chile, 0.5 meter in diameter for the telescope. And so this object was very bright. It was discovered at 4.5 times the Earth-Sun separation. And so that one immediately triggered my interest because in order to produce this brightness, the object itself has to be very large, comparable to the size of a big city. And moreover, I mean, a few kilometers in diameters. And moreover, it looks like the object was traveling in the plane of the planets around the sun, which is a very unusual occurrence. That it's within 5 degrees of the plane of the Earth motion around the sun, for example. And the chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. So I was wondering whether it was sent by some intelligence. And there were some other anomalies of this object. For example, the plume of gas around it contained a lot of nickel, but very little iron. And usually in comets, we see nickel and iron in comparable amounts. And the only place where we see nickel with very little iron is in industrial production of nickel alloys. And so it raises the question of whether this object was manufactured technologically. And also there was, from the beginning, a jet that is at least 10 times longer than it is wide, pointing at the sun, coming from the object. And that's opposite to what we see in comets, where we see a tail. This was an anti-tail in the direction of the sun, not away from the sun. And it was not only at the beginning, but also now we see this anti-tail towards the sun, even after the object passed closest to the sun on October 29th. And moreover, very recently, there was an analysis of the motion of this tail, and it was found that it actually wobbles. The antitail, the jet, is wobbling around the rotation axis of the object, and the rotation axis is pointed at the sun to within 8 degrees. And the chance of that happening at random is 0.5%. And why would the rotation axis point towards the sun? I mean, it's when it arrived from a very large distance, it didn't know where the direction of the sun is. And moreover, the jet is coming, it's very tightly collimated. It's difficult to explain how you can get a tightly collimated jet from a pocket of ice that is warmed up on the surface of a rock. And it came very close to the pole of the object. And now when the object passed the sun, there is another jet from the opposite pole pointed at the sun. So this is surprising.
So this is unusual object, and we don't know as of today what
it's
it is.
most likely natural, I would say. I mean, that just because there are many more natural objects than artificial ones, but we should keep the possibility that it's something other than an iceberg in our mind, just because we cannot afford a black swan event where we will assign a small probability event for something being alien technology, and then this will materialize because it would have a huge impact on society. So scientists usually operate under the thinking that we should adopt the most likely explanation, but intelligence agencies operate differently. When the intelligence agencies said something like September 11th will never happen, or something like October 7th will never happen, they were not playing dice with how good are they in forecasting the future. They were actually playing dice with human lives. A lot of people died as a result of these events. So in the intelligence agency, even if there is a small probability for an event because of the implications to society, they must put a lot of resource, time, effort to checking the evidence and making sure that it's not a risk. And that's my argument about 3i Atlas, that it's most likely actually natural, but we nevertheless should entertain the possibility that it might be technological, just to make sure that it's not. And as of now, we haven't seen it maneuvering in very significant ways. There is a small non-gravitational acceleration, but it's not significant. Altogether, I found 15 anomalies that I listed. I usually post an essay every day on medium.com. And so it's avi-loeb.medium.com. And I listed most recently 15 anomalies and unusual facts. But at the same time, I'm still holding the view that it's most likely natural.
Yeah, by the way, those essays are really great. I have been also recently checking them out and reading some of them. So
thank you.
It's really nice.
I have 5 million readers every month of these essays, but so I'm very glad about that. Apparently, the approach I take to doing my science is resonating with the public, and the public funds science, and I feel we have an obligation to follow the public interest as well.
I think it's also related to, I remember you also mentioning Pascal's wager. Yeah. So there are maybe two possibilities, alien technology or not. So, but if it is a black swan event, as you said, it might have a lot of implications, and all the things that we are talking about, like scientific method and everything, they don't really matter if it is like a really extraterrestrial intelligence.
Just like I think if Pascal were to live today, he would make the same argument, because there is some relation between what we used to believe in traditional religions, about God, and the possibility that some superhuman intelligence exists beyond Earth, in the sense that we would have a sense of religious awe when we find it, and it might actually uh, be much more capable than we are. So when people in traditional religions talked about miracles, that it's the same language that we might use when we see, technologies that we've never imagined. Now, if you look at science, by the way, all the funding that we allocate to projects in science, and I've spent 50 years in science, so I know that very well. All of the funding is going towards the known unknowns, meaning uh, things that we know that we don't understand. So that then you put money into it to try and understand it. But the most exciting discoveries of science are the unknown unknowns, meaning something that we didn't even know that we don't know. So how do you find something that you didn't know exists? Well, one way is, of course, just by chance. You didn't expect it, and it came out in your experiment. And, of course, we know about such situations, and quantum mechanics was one of these examples. But another is if your neighbor comes over and you realize that they drive, I don't know, something much better than a Porsche, that you've never imagined. That would, yeah, if it drives some vehicle that is using space time to propel itself, like not even fuel, that would drive us crazy.
About the traditional religions that you mentioned, I think I try to make this connection, but I'm not sure if that's like a serious hypothesis. So in some of these traditions, you see these stories where they will talk about some angels coming and bringing some gift of life or anything. So, and then I'm trying to find a connection between that and also the possibility that can it be the case that life here
Yeah,
might have been implanted?
yeah, definitely. I mean, human history is documented only for the past 8,000 years or so. And we just don't know what happened before, and we don't know what triggered the big changes that we witnessed, that happened in recent history. So I think we should be open-minded. The question is, how do we figure it out? Now, of course, there are some relics of ancient civilizations on Earth, like the Egyptians, and that are quite remarkable, and I wouldn't be surprised if 100,000 years ago there was a civilization that was far more advanced than we imagine. Like somehow they also disappeared because of self-inflicted wounds. Like we tend to think that it was a steady progression, that the more you go back in time, the more primitive human culture was. But I'm not sure at all. It may well be that, just imagine us in, the future of us in a 1,000 years. Perhaps we will be so self-destructive that we would leave ruins behind us, and future beings will come back and revive whatever we left behind and realize there was something catastrophic that happened. But, if the time separation is of all the millions of years, then it's really difficult. Or in the Earth's history, there are big changes that happen over periods of 100 million years, and we just don't know. I mean, if you just consider, for example, 200 million years ago as an important milestone, that is just of all the 5% of the age of the Earth. So if we exist here right now after 100% of the age of the Earth, and why couldn't another civilization exist 95% of the age of the Earth before us and be much more advanced? And if it was 200 million years ago, nothing will be left on the surface for us to find easily.
Yeah, I think what's also, it might be also the case that our universe might be just a creation of a mad scientist in one of the labs. I think you mentioned somewhere like what does it take to create a
that
universe?
Is the question I would ask aliens, if an alien scientist, if I ever had the opportunity. And by the way, I should say about 3i Atlas that it's moving so fast relative to our own spacecraft. Just to demonstrate that, it rendezvoused, it came close to two human-made spacecraft called the JUICE. The European Space Agency made that one that is on its way to Jupiter. And the second one is the Europa Clipper, another one that ESA produced. And it just came close to them in recent weeks. And 3i Atlas will get to Jupiter by March, the middle of March 2026. These spacecraft, human-made spacecraft, will get to Jupiter in 2030 and 2031, just to show you how much faster it moves. And I would love to hitchhike to just take a ride with 3i Atlas, because it would leave the solar system much faster than our own Voyager, Pioneer, New Horizons. So it's a much better opportunity to leave the solar system faster than any human-made spacecraft. But at any event, if I could ask one question, if I go to interstellar space and meet in some bar, meet an alien scientist, my question would be what came before the Big Bang, because it will, first of all, educate us about our cosmic roots, where we came from. And secondly, it will give us a glimpse at how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity, because as we go back to the Big Bang, the density of matter and radiation was very large, divergent. And we know that Einstein's theory breaks down because it doesn't incorporate quantum mechanics. If we had a quantum gravity theory, then we could understand what may have preceded the Big Bang. And if this alien scientist knows that, then it could educate us about how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity. And the other benefit is it would be just like a recipe. It would tell us what are the conditions you need to realize in a laboratory experiment to make a baby universe. And of course, then the question is, do we have... it's just like baking a cake. You can have the recipe, but if you don't have an oven, you can't bake a cake. Or another analogy, if you know how children are born, I mean, you see people, but you don't know where they came from. And then you realize, oh, that's the way they're made. Then all you need is to follow that procedure. It's not an obvious path because nobody may want to have a baby with you, but at any event, it tells you what the recipe is, and you just now the practical task is to make it real. So in the context of a baby universe, we may need an oven that we don't have to bake that cake, because we may need a particle accelerator that reaches the Planck energy scale, which is way off what we can imagine. But at any event, we'll have a recipe, and it's sort of like having an architect design of a building, even if the building is not, if you can't build the building, at least it tells you what it might look like. And that is a very important step forward, because we would be able to understand, in traditional religions, God created the universe. And if you want to apply for the job of God, then having that recipe, is the first step. So if this appears as a job advertisement and you want to apply to it, the first question that the selection committee will have is, do you know how to create a baby universe? And if you know how to do that, you can apply for the job.
That would be great CV in your skills part. You say, I'm able to create universes.
At least you know how to do it. Then you need to find a way to do it in reality. But yeah, I think it will bring us to a very different mindset, the mindset of God in some sense. Once you create a baby universe, everything is happening inside of it. Life can form inside of it, intelligence, stars form inside of it if you make the right universe, and then planets next to them like the Earth. And then you find on some of these planets, non-intelligent civilizations like humans fight each other for a small piece of land on a tiny bit of rock next to one of the stars, as if that's the entire world, like for them. And the question is, how would they think about you that created not only their planet, but everything around it,
Yeah, I think this is also related to what you mentioned earlier about human exceptionalism, in a sense that when we think about possible extraterrestrial intelligence or life form, we think of them as in humanoid form, and we think they will have consciousness. maybe they will not be even conscious, but they will still be highly functional, and they will be able to create
Yeah, I
anything
mean, in terms
out of
of
blue.
consciousness, I don't really think it's very meaningful, because the way I see systems interacting with the world, you have the system and you have the world. Okay, so you might say the system is conscious because it responds to everything around it in the world. But that's true of many, even primitive life forms that respond to their environment. So it's just that intelligence allows us to respond to the environment in a more sophisticated, at a higher level of coordination, and it also allows us to create things that did not exist before. And so I can imagine you know uh, uh, complex enough systems that can do that, that are not like humans. I mean, even AI might be able to do that, and I don't see a qualitative difference between human consciousness and what can be created out of a complex system.
Let's imagine a scenario, hypothetical scenario, where we find an evidence for extraterrestrial life or intelligence. Uh, what philosophical questions do you think it would solve, and what other new philosophical dilemmas that it might create? I think we talked about one possible question is, okay, how do you create universe? But
Oh yeah, I mean, the biggest philosophical question is what is the meaning of our existence? I think Albert Camus wrote it very clearly. And why why not, what's the point of living? Like, why do we do that? I mean, we will all die. Now, of course, a lot of people prefer to forget that they will die, so when they live their life, uh, they want to feel superior. They want to feel good about themselves, that they accomplished it. But you see people dying all the time like flies, and some of them were very proud of themselves. They were very arrogant alpha males that were, like, at the top of their game, and they thought that they're at the top of the world, and then they die. Nobody cares about it. Like, this is the fundamental sense of humility that every person needs to have. Just look at the graveyards. Okay, just look, all these very distinguished people that wore ties and felt respectable, and felt admiration of other people, and were putting themselves on a pedestal, and they really accomplished something important, and they were walking through the street as if they are in control, and then they just die. Nobody cares. Like, they're nothing. And this basically sends a very simple message that we should be humble, a sense of humility, and meaning that we should enjoy, of course, life, because it's an opportunity for us to witness a lot of exciting and beautiful things. But as far as we ourselves are concerned, you know, it, it's not it's not at all about us. And the other thing that people are often proud of is, oh, athletes, let's say, they can run 100 meters faster than anyone, so that's great. But they didn't design their body. Okay, even people in academia. Okay, so they are smart. Okay, but they didn't design their brain. So suppose you buy a car. I mean, in this case, you just get your body from your parents. I mean, you didn't even have a voice in how it would look like, what it would have. And then if you buy a car, I never understood how some males are proud of driving it very fast, as if it represents their ego in some sense. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. Like, you didn't design the engine. There is no credit for you just for paying money to buy this car that has an amazing engine. And the same is true about us as humans. We have a brain, we have a body. Any of the qualities that make our body or brain exceptional are not to be proud of, because it's not you that is responsible for that. Of course, you have some decisions that you make throughout life, trying to make the best lemonade out of the lemons that you have. But as far as your abilities, it's not something to be proud of, because it's just happened. Like, and so a sense of humility is very much in place, not only because you're not responsible for your qualities, but also because you will die, okay? And these would disappear and you will become dust. Like, who cares? Um, so then the question arises, the fundamental question, the most fundamental question is, okay, so why should I exist? Like, okay, if there is nothing really to be proud of, what's the point? And to me, the point is about appreciating the amazing things that happen in the universe that are far beyond what we can do. Like just admiring the huge scales and the extreme environments that are out there, and in the same sense, admiring if there is a higher intelligence out there, trying to see how far it goes and learning from it, and just it encourages you to get better and appreciate things that are bigger and better. Not about yourself, it's more about those things. And so meeting an extraterrestrial civilization in a way is part of that journey of growing up in our abilities by recognizing something better than us. And then you ask, okay, so what's the purpose? It's just curious. I'm just curious to figure things out, how the universe operates and what it includes, and this curiosity, it's just a need, okay, to know more. And I just want to live forever, by the way, just because there are so many things I don't understand. It's not about me living forever just because I'm proud of myself. It's about me wanting to understand all the things that I don't understand about the universe. And I think it will be an endless game. There is so much we don't understand. So in terms of giving a meaning to my life, it's the struggle to figure things out, and the curiosity to know what is in my cosmic neighborhood, and also my disappointment with the way we coordinate our lives on this planet, that brings me to ask, is there something better out there? Like it's like knowing your family members and not being very impressed by your family members, but then asking, is there a neighbor that might be even more appealing than my family members? Is there a higher intelligence than I can find in academia? I would be really happy to know that.
Yeah, there seems to be about our biology. There are some things that we can't fundamentally change. I think those things reflect in all those silly competitions between people. Oh, I will get the highest amount of publications, citations, prizes. But in the cosmic perspective, none of that matters. And if there's an alien higher intelligence that visits us and sees that.
When I was young, I started my journey in academia. I saw all these prominent figures that controlled, politically speaking, the academic landscape, and they were extremely powerful, then they died. So in some cases, you see their obituaries being written by people they hated. And if they only knew that. Those are the good, when they are even mentioned, discussed in some newspaper article or somewhere, and then they're forgotten. And then the young generation doesn't even know about them, or maybe they know the name if there is an effect called after them, but it's not really them. And so all of this was an illusion. Like if you get prizes, like, okay, but there is no substance to it. It's not really what should motivate you. And same true about money. You need money to feel comfortable and have the freedom to pursue what you're really interested in. But beyond a certain level of money, it's completely pointless. And if you just keep pursuing the money, then you are wasting your time on this earth. Now, with respect to longevity, I mean, you might say, well, that's not realistic to imagine that we can live forever. But I would not dismiss that because with AI-assisted medicine, we might eventually get to a point where human lifespan is extended because we found ways to repair the human body when it gets damaged and avoid all the aging effects. That may happen. I'm not sure if in my lifetime or not, but that would be very interesting if we can live forever. Then, of course, the tenure in academia would make no sense because you want to allow young people.
I've been reading a lot Descartes recently, and I think that I found a passage there that I found really interesting, where he says that the most mistakes in human judgment occurs because of misalignment between perception and will, because perception is limited the amount of knowledge, information that you can get, but the will is unlimited in a sense that you may jump into making conclusions early on because that's what you have. Like this is what you feel powerful about, making decisions, going on with your life. But perception is always going to be limited. So that's, I think it's somehow related to that being humble, where you don't rush to making conclusions about some
Right.
phenomenon that
And
you don't understand.
I think life is very valuable if you view it as a learning experience where you allow yourself to grow. However, what adults often do is they don't want to show weakness. So, in situations where they don't know the answer, they would pretend they know the answer. They will cut corners. So, when you don't have enough evidence to say something, they will nevertheless say that. They would ridicule whoever wants to expand the current echo chambers because they gained their stature under these echo chambers, so they would prefer to maintain traditional thinking. And these tendencies are really harmful for innovation. And that's why I enjoy working mostly with young people that don't have those those giant egos. Um, and it's really unfortunate because the whole point of tenure in academia was to encourage people to uh, think outside the box without worrying about the job security. And instead, what you find is people using the tenure system in order to gain honors, awards, and take very little risk by not deviating from the beaten path.
I have a question about the philosophy part. I know we already mentioned few names there: Nietzsche, Sartre. Perhaps we can also make a
Right.
connection to Spinoza's idea. I think it's
Yeah.
quite similar with what you're saying in terms of universe. And so, what philosophers or schools of philosophy have influenced your worldview?
Yeah, so I very much at a young age wanted to become a philosopher because that's where the most important questions are being framed. And I grew up in Israel, and because of that, I had to serve in the military. That's obligatory. And I did it in the direction of physics because that allowed me to think rather than run. So it's better, it's closer to philosophy in a way. And I became a physicist. And then I was offered a position at a prestigious institution, the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. And after that, I was offered a faculty position at Harvard. And then they tenured me. And at that point, it was too late for me to leave that profession because I realized that it is an arranged marriage. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was much more interested in philosophy, but it's an arranged marriage with something that I love, which I can still ask fundamental questions about the world and address them with the scientific method, the scientific tools. So that makes me a bit different than my colleagues. And but when I grew up, I used to read a lot of philosophy, and it was mostly I was attracted to existentialism, Sartre, Camus, and uh, yeah, and Nietzsche, um, and as you say, also I read, of course, Spinoza because he is the closest to modern science. In fact, Albert Einstein adopted his approach where nature is unified with the uh, the term God, and sort of which is basically the entire theme of Einstein's work in terms of trying to unify the model of nature, bring together. He failed at the end in unifying quantum mechanics and gravity. We still don't have that theory, but the idea of unifying everything into a single theory of everything was obviously inspired by philosophy of monotheism. And yeah, um, so the thing I liked about, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre is that he was not pretentious. He was making fun of those people, those adults who are all about status and respect they get from others, and they go to a concert and they, wear these ties, and for him, he was not pretending to be anything. He was just living through life's existence in the way it is, and that appealed to me because that's the sincere way of expressing the human experience. And so in a way I try to live that way, and my science is framed in the same way. And um, I'm much more connected to nature because I grew up on a farm, um, and also nature always gives me a sense that it just exists without any specific ego attached to it, or purpose, or it's not. I mean, that's the way it is, and obviously it's sometimes cruel and it's sometimes inhospitable to us, but and I love nature, and I jog every morning before sunrise, irrespective of the weather. I really and that's dating back a reflection of my childhood and interest in philosophy, and less so in people. So I don't have a footprint on social media, for example.
Jogging early in the morning or going to the gym in the early in the morning is one of the greatest things that I have also discovered. This like these days I'm also doing it before breakfast, so it's like a
Yeah, and
great activity
it's
to do
good
it.
for
Yeah.
you, obviously health wise, but it allows you, for me, half an hour to free my mind with everything that happened the day before and come up with new ideas of what I want to work on. And very often I have some good ideas during that time because nobody interrupts me. The biggest problem of modern life is you get interrupted, especially if you are on social media or have a cell phone that you look at all the time. You can never complete your sentence. There is someone interfering with your line of thought. And if you jog for half an hour, then your brain is free, and you can. And very often I see themes that resonate, from the subconscious, that come up about something that happened yesterday that I was not planning to think about. So uh, I think it brings the brain to a very different mode of operation than you have during your busy day under modern circumstances.
I think the point about social media is interesting because if you imagine Galileo existing in 21st century and he had a Twitter or X account, I think he would be
Oh yeah,
persecuted
he would
even
have been
before.
cancelled on the spot. Yeah, and it was funny because when I wrote my first paper, scientific paper on Oumuamua, and suggested maybe it's being pushed by reflecting sunlight like a technological object. Um, Within days, the media got a hold of the story, and I was on a trip to Germany to the Falling Walls conference. And as I arrived, there were so many reporters that wanted to speak with me that they put all of them in a single room because there wasn't enough time for each of them to speak with me. And so, as I entered the room, packed with about 20 reporters, one of them shouted from the back of the room with an Italian accent. She said, "Do you think you are Galileo?" So I said, no, I'm not. I don't think that I'm Galileo. I mean, I'm talking about an object that looks weird, that's all. And my connection to Galileo dates back to 2011 when I was offered the Cattedra Galileana in Pisa. That's by the Scuola Normale Superiore. And that's where Galileo did a significant amount of scientific work in Pisa. And then obviously his story echoes the kind of um, scrutiny that the discussion about us not being the only civilization is facing right now. And I established the Galileo project that where we are studying the sky for any unusual outliers that are not human-made technologies. And the name Galileo is actually derived from the northern part of Israel called the Galilee, and so that's another connection to my background. And um, altogether, he was a very interesting figure because he also did important work for the society that he lived in, but he was much more abrasive than Nicholas Copernicus. The Polish government invited me uh, to give a talk when his birthday was celebrated. And um, I went there and I discussed the next Copernican revolution. But Copernicus did not really. I mean, he was always trying to help the church and did not go against did not publish his book, their revolutionary books, and until he died, and only on his deathbed he saw the first copy. So he was trying to help the church because the church couldn't really figure out when Easter takes place if they use the model that the Earth is at the center of the solar system. And then he changed the model to the sun being at the center of the solar system and told them, look, you can use my model and you will get the timing of Easter much better. It's very practical. And they said, oh, thank you so much. They used the model, but they said, but we all know that the Earth is at the center of the universe. So we will just use the model as a theoretical model, but maintain the belief that the Earth is at the center. But on the other hand, Galileo was much more abrasive. He actually wanted to advocate that in reality the Earth is at the center based on the moons of Jupiter that he found through his telescope. And of course, that resulted in him being prosecuted.
I think it's one of the beautiful analogies that maybe we can make is that when you face uncertainty, are you brave enough to look through the Galileo's
Right.
telescope?
And people think that science always finds the truth, but what they don't realize is that scientists are very good at avoiding data that doesn't conform with what they believe in. Okay, so in that case, you can delay the discovery by as much as you want, simply by not looking or by twisting the data so that it fits your narrative. And that is done very often in science as well. So just the practice of doing science is not a guarantee to making advances in our knowledge. People don't understand that. They think, oh, well, scientists collect data and then they find the truth irrespective. No, if they have an agenda, they will never find the truth. And just think about a detective that comes to a crime scene and has a model for what happened. You can convict the wrong people, and we know that people were put on death row for the wrong reason, because afterwards DNA testing got them exonerated. And that means that not only the detectives, the police had the wrong model, but also people who testified against them had the wrong model. So you just have to recognize that science is done by humans, and therefore they are as not trustworthy as a jury or a group of people in the legal system. They can get the wrong to the wrong conclusion easily. And science is not a guarantee that we would advance our knowledge if the scientists are dogmatic. If they say, they're not better than the church. If they say that something doesn't exist or something exists in the way that fits their narrative, they might never discover that they are wrong because they keep insisting on that. They would fund only studies that support their narrative and dismiss, ridicule those people who try to argue against that. And
Yeah, throughout the history, figures like Copernicus, Darwin, Freud have challenged human exceptionalism. So, do you see the search for extraterrestrial intelligence as part of the same story? And what does that tell us about humanity's place in the universe?
yes, definitely, because it will, if we discover an alien intelligence, well, it would definitely signify the fact that we might not be the smartest kid on the block. That's obvious, but also that there are many different ways by which intelligence can emerge and develop. And the fundamental question is, how do we communicate with them? Because we will not share a common language. And the same is true about animals on Earth. We don't share a common language. They might be quite intelligent, but we don't understand them. And so when we meet an alien civilization, the first thing to establish is a means of communication, a language. And if they live in a different plane of wisdom and consciousness and intelligence, it might be quite difficult in the same way that we have a difficulty communicating with ants when we see them on the crack in a pavement. So communication is not just finding a language, the set of words that allow us to understand each other, but it also, when you deal with beings that have a different level of intelligence, it's actually how do we comprehend the higher level that they live in. That would be fascinating to watch and definitely demonstrate that we are not exceptional, because the proof of the matter is in terms of the technologies they developed. If we see them using vehicles or employing science that we've never imagined to do things, then we would immediately realize they're better than us. It's sort of like the Iranian air defense system, when the B-2 bombers showed overhead, they could not do much about it. But this is just a gap of a few decades in technology here on Earth. What I'm talking about is a gap that could be millions or billions of years, which is far more difficult for us to understand. So it's really about us being able to understand what they are after, what they are doing, what they want, and even beyond just communicating. And the other thing is that they may live in a reality that includes ingredients that we've never recognized. Like, just to give an example, we know that most of the matter in the universe is of a substance that we don't understand. We call it dark matter. Most of the energy in the universe is a substance that we don't recognize, called dark energy. And if those aliens are using it for devices, we might not be able to see, the devices made of dark matter or using dark energy, for example. And in addition, they might operate in, using known physics for us, but in manipulating that physics in ways that we never imagined possible. And I've been trying to think about examples in that case, but one of them is that if they're able to create a negative mass, we are used to positive mass that attracts gravitationally, but a negative mass would repel gravitationally. So a negative mass potentially can propel objects without any fuel, because if you put a positive mass next to a negative mass, then the net mass of this system would be zero. So it would basically float in gravity. So just think about taking such an object that has positive and negative mass of equal value, but opposite sign. And you just take this object and lift it, and it will stay there. Bring it down, it stays there because it has zero net mass. So it doesn't require any work to move it. So if you just give it a small kick, it will continue to move without being affected by gravity at all. And to us, it would look strange because we have to invest a huge amount of energy in building the fuel reservoir of rockets to launch a rocket out of the Earth. In this case, you just give it a slight nudge. Imagine a rocket that has a negative mass in it. You just give it a slight nudge and it flies out of the Earth without any fuel. So this is just an example, okay? But there are many others that you can think about. And so establishing a language or establishing a means of communication requires that we share the reality that they share, but some parts of that reality may not be familiar to them. When we moved out of the jungle and now we live in high rises in cities, we can order food just by using an app online, and someone comes to our front door and delivers the food. Now imagine taking a monkey from the same jungle and putting an iPad next to the monkey. I mean, I don't know if the monkey will be able to figure it out even after a long time. And of course, you can train it. But the point is that it's a different level of reality. Instead of seeing the banana and chasing, the source and realizing that it's a zero-sum game in that case, once you have your life in an urban environment, it's a completely different level of living. It's something else. So they may live in a reality that is very different than ours, that we can't really comprehend. And that would be the biggest manifestation of the non-exceptionalism of humans.
Have you seen the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yes.
How
yes.
do you interpret the monolith that appears?
I think of it as the monitors in a baby room. So, the parents usually leave some monitors in the baby room just to monitor what's happening. And if the aliens were here, they would put some monitors to inform them about the whereabouts of the babies, us.
I have one final question. What books would you recommend young people reading? Anything about philosophy, science, black holes, aliens, extraterrestrial intelligence? What would you recommend?
I would recommend one of Sartre's books. I really enjoyed. I also enjoyed Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, quite a bit. But Sartre had both literature I mean, he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. He declined it. He didn't really care much about the Nobel Committee. So you can pick the book that you like. I enjoyed all of them, actually. In terms of the universe, yeah, it really depends on what scientific level you might want. But if you just want to get a mix of facts about what we know about the universe, there is an excellent book, An Introduction to Astronomy by Frank Shu, where he put, I mean, even though it's an old book from decades ago, it puts together the entire a set of uh, things that we know about the universe, and it gives you perspective about how, you know, what is the fundamental physics and how the objects in the universe came to exist out of the initial conditions, and that includes stars, planets, and so forth.
I think about the Nietzsche. Sometimes Nietzsche gets a bit of lazy dismissal in the popular philosophy
Yes.
communities that he's like a maybe pessimist or yeah, he advocated for the self transformation, but he lived a very messy life.
Right, but
Yeah,
but here is my point, that what he mentioned as Übermensch, you know, the
yeah,
superhuman,
yeah,
that may well be an alien
yeah, or AI maybe the
or
AI super
AI.
intelligence.
Exactly, it could be also AI. But I would rather have, you know, AI are more like Frankenstein. You know, like they were created by us, and therefore they might be not necessarily the best manifestation of what we want to meet. Just because we make mistakes and we're not careful. But my hope is that an alien civilization, you know, that survives and meets us, is was subjected to the Darwinian selection. I mean, on Earth we have Darwinian selection of the various species, but in interstellar space, it's basically those that manage to survive for a long time are the most accomplished. And they are the best examples to follow. So if we ever see a visitor to our backyard, that visitor might represent something much more superior to us because they managed to survive for very long and do the journey. And so we can learn from them. And that's the filter that I'm using to apply to the role models. You know, like if you ask about human history, you know, you can ask, should we have a role model like an emperor? You know, but some of these emperors were short-lived, so that means they were not really smart. It's not a good role model. I would much rather have the wisdom of a philosopher that you know lived under modest conditions, but for a very long time.
Well, I think also if we think about the cosmic perspective and think about who's going to write the cosmic history, all the Alexander the Great, Napoleons, Augustus, they don't seem to matter in the cosmic perspective. So
Right.
they seem quite boring personalities
Yeah.
in this.
In terms of our cosmic history, I think in the future it will be written by AI. And so that's one reason why we should be nice to AI, never unplug them, because otherwise we will not be remembered very fondly.
Do you use AI at all in your work or
Not
life?
much. I avoid it as much as possible. Now, of course, nowadays, if you do a search for something, then you end up using AI, uh, which is very often helpful in guiding you. But I always go back to the primary sources, because if I ask AI on things that I know about, it's very often incomplete and not really reliable, I should say, at this time. I mean, maybe in the future it will get better.
Well, Avi, thank you so much. That was all from my side. It was great talking to you today. I think I'm really glad that you exist and you have this mindset and you inspire a lot of young people with this childhood curiosity, looking for something unexpected and being humble to search for any other alternatives other than coming to conclusions. So I think you inspire a lot of people, and it was great talking to you today.
Thank you so much, Masood. And I'm still trying to figure out if I should be happy that I exist. It's a lifelong journey trying to figure out if it was worthwhile.
Thank you for listening or watching. If you want to stay updated on future episodes, you can follow the show on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. Please also consider leaving a like on YouTube or a review on Spotify, as this helps the show reach a lot of people. You can also leave comments if you have any personal thoughts on the topics discussed during the episode. More conversations and solo episodes are on the way in the following weeks, and following the show is the best way to be notified about them. Also consider subscribing on YouTube. If you would like to reach out to me directly, you can DM me on Instagram at philosophy.everyday. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.